As always, I really appreciate you tuning into the Sanctuary Sunday School. This week's subject is dwelling in Canaan, and we can find the text in the book of Genesis in the 13th chapter. Now, we see last week we talked about Abram and we talked about the promise that God made with him, the covenant, and the fact that God told Abram to leave his father's house, leave his land, leave his kinspeople, and everything that was familiar to him. Now, we see that's exactly what he did, and he took nobody but his own family and his nephew Lot and Lot's family. Now, both Abram and Lot were very wealthy men, and they had their own cattle and land and servants. And sometimes with growth comes conflict, and there was conflict brewing between Abram's people and Lot's people. And I love this because it demonstrates the godliness, the wisdom, and the leadership of Abram because he decided that it was time for him and Lot to separate. And not only that, he gave Lot first pick. Now, this is significant because Abram was the oldest. He was the uncle, and Lot was the nephew. So he could have just said, look, this is what I'm going to take, and this is what you get. But he didn't do that. He allowed Lot to choose his land. And the text says that Lot chose the land in the plain of Jordan. And he looked at the land, and it seemed like it was goodly watered, which means it was flourishing, and it looked like it would be a good land where he could thrive. And then it says that Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom. But it also says that the men of Sodom were evil. And so when you think about that, just really quickly, when we're making decisions and we're directing our lives, sometimes we'll pick something because it looks good, right? And it looks prosperous, but there's evil nearby. And sometimes we'll overlook or ignore the evil because this look good and I want this and it's worth it. So sometimes you want to consider that because we know what ultimately happened to the twin cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So this was Lot's decision. And again, Abram told him, he said, you go left, I'll go right. If you want to go right, I'll go left. It's up to you. So we can't say that Abram gave Lot the bad land. That's not what happened. He allowed Lot to choose exactly what he wanted. Another lesson that I took from this is that Abraham was a godly leader, and this decision showed that all he really cared about was obeying God and his faith in God. He wasn't really looking at and worrying about the land because it was kind of like it doesn't really matter what I take or where I go. God is going to bless me because he said that he was going to bless me, and I believe him. And that was such a powerful lesson to me as a leader because when you're in charge and you have all of this responsibility and you tend to try to figure things out and work things out, and it's easy to become overwhelmed or worried about what's going on or what's going to happen. So this was such a message of comfort to me that if God called me and if God told me to go, I don't have anything to worry about because it is going to be all right. And God's going to work everything out. And we see here that once Abram separated from Lot, that God came to Abram and he told him, he said, look to the north, look to the south, look to the east, and look to the west. And everything that you see belongs to you and your seed. Your seed will inhabit this. And that's so amazing. And I thought about that because sometimes, you try to take people with you or make people a part of something that God has for you and your seed. This was the blessing of Abram. We see this faith and we see how God told Abram. And I love this because he said, not only are you going to be blessed, but your seed is going to be blessed. And if I think about it, when David, he said, I was young and now I'm old, but I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. God cares about you. He cares about your next generation, your children, your grandchildren, your children's children's children's. And that is so important because God, He's faithful. And when we talk about Abram and his faithfulness, well, if Abram, who was a human being, is a man, could be that faithful, just think about how faithful God is. God is faithful and he will be with you through generation, through generation, through generation, just like he was with Abram and Abraham's generations down through the years. And I thank God for that when you talk about dwelling in Canaan. Okay, Canaan is the land that God promised to Abram. And I want you to think about that because God has made a promise to each and every one of us. And it's important that we dwell in the place that God has promised to us. We have so much envy and strife in the world, and not only in the world, but even in the church. And we need to be in a place where we're content with what God has given us. We need to be able to dwell in the place that God has given us. You don't see here, Abram told Lot, he said, okay, look, you take your land and you're fine. You don't see Abram worried about what Lot was doing and what Lot was doing with his land. And as a matter of fact, we know what happened with the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So Abram didn't have anything to worry about. And it doesn't show where he had any ill will or animosity about the land that Lot selected. And that is such a powerful lesson to us. If we focus on dwelling in the place where God has assigned us to be, and we don't have any animosity or jealousy toward the next person, that's the blessing. Listen to this. God told him, I'm going to give you everything that you see. And he didn't stop there. He said, and your seed will be numbered as the dust of the earth. I dare you to go outside and try to count every little particle of dust. You will be counting from now until eternity. And he said that is how huge your seed is going to be. And as I said last week, when we read these promises of God and when we read these prophecies and these covenants, it's a blessing because now we're living in a time where we've seen God keep these promises and we've seen how faithful God is. So how can we not trust him? How can we not love him? How can we not obey him? And how can we not go when he tells us to go? And how can we not dwell in the place that God has given us? And he talked about this and he talked about Abram and how this is the beginning, again, like I said, of this story. And this is really what the Bible is all about because it goes from Abram and everybody else, including Jesus, was a descendant of Abram. And God used this man and God used this people to, first of all, just to send his only begotten son and save all of us and to just give us that example of righteousness. And that is just such a beautiful thing. And the message that I took away from this lesson is that when God calls you, he is always going to provide for you. And it is never dangerous or risky to go where God sends you. If you go, he will make a place for you. You know, there's another scripture that I love that says your gift will make room for you. Well, your faith will make room for you. Abram's faith got him this land that was given to him by God that he would be able to inherit and pass down to future generations. His seed is still living in that land to this very day. So what we want to do is obey God, have faith in him, trust him, do what he tells us to do, go where he sends us, and dwell in the place that God has given to you to be your dwelling place.